Let's talk about the stimulus now, because this economy, folks, new data out this morning, we are in real trouble if we do not get a stimulus, and a stimulus fast. There are signs this morning that we could actually see a stimulus before Election Day. Wall Street is happy this morning. Wall Street knows something perhaps maybe we don't. Talking to analysts at Wall Street saying, by the fact that President Trump came home and is out of the hospital shows us that stimulus talks will continue. Well, guess what? They were set to whether or not the president was coming home or not, because he's not actually handling the stimulus discussions. Treasury Secretary Mnuchin is, along with Nancy Pelosi. And the news of the morning is that they are meeting again today to get further along on these stimulus talks. So while the world burns down, they're quietly working together. I'm cautiously optimistic that they're actually going to be able to pass the stimulus. They had an hour-long phone call yesterday. They're meeting again today. And according to sources, they are getting closer. Another $1,200 stimulus check, another $600 per week in unemployment benefits, federal aid to state and local governments, and funds for the airline and restaurant industries. They're just trying to get to a number that works. So all of those things are on the table at this hour, which is good news, because we're getting some other economic data that's really troubling. Then also Fed Chief Jerome Powell is set to speak as well. So things are a little bit on hold. We're trying to watch to see what he says. But with all of these new rounds of furloughs and layoffs, and additional furloughs and layoffs coming even overnight, we already saw. Regal Cinemas shutting down, 600 locations, 45,000 employees out of work, airline industry collapsing, Southwest Airlines canceling 90,000 flights during the holiday season. They're trying now to ask people at Southwest Airlines, hey, will you just take a pay cut and then I won't have to furlough you? So I'll lose half my wages if I work at Southwest, but at least I won't lose my job. That might be a stopgap measure so they don't have to lay off so many people. This is the choice right now. But we're getting some really interesting demographic data from the Wall Street Journal. I thought that this was fascinating. And if you add this to the trouble that we're seeing in the evictions, foreclosures, which we are headed for a massive housing crisis in the next 6 to 8 months, the eviction moratoriums that have all but dried up, the lack of unemployment benefits that have all but dried up in many states, even though many states put in additional unemployment benefits, those are starting to come to an end. Healthcare coverage for people that don't have it. People having to declare bankruptcy because they can't pay for their own healthcare, their hospital bills. But this bit of demographic data I think is fascinating, which is that Americans simply aren't having babies. The birth rate in the United States is dropping significantly. Immigration is dropping significantly. Illegal immigration is dropping significantly. And you don't have to blame it on a wall. It's not about a wall. It's that people don't want to come to the United States. In the past 24 hours, we've seen an additional 40,000 coronavirus cases. 40,000. That's since President Trump left Walter Reed. But here is this discussion about this from Wall Street Journal on this new demographic data and why, if we don't fix this, we are heading for a cliff.
To long-term growth. And this pandemic, I think, has tended to aggravate two serious problems the United States has had. One is that the fertility rate, which has been declining basically since the last recession, is probably going to drop again. The Congressional Budget Office thinks it'll fall to 1.6 next year, which would be the lowest in at least a century of data, well below the 2.1 number that we think of as the replacement rate. And so that alone is going to put a serious drag on the population, because kids not born next year will not be part of the labor force 20 years from now. Now, what do you do about low fertility? Well, you can increase immigration. But according to the CBO, we're going to have fewer immigrants too, because of the barriers that were raised to immigration because of the pandemic, and the fact that we're having fewer undocumented coming in anyway. So you put those two things together, there's going to be a lot fewer Americans 20 to 30 years from now. And that puts a greater burden on the ones remaining to both grow the economy and sustain the very high levels of debt that we're now carrying and are going to be carrying.
So it's all about this debt burden for our future generations. This debt burden, this lack of growth in the economy, this slowdown among companies hiring, and the amount of layoffs that are unfolding. Without a stimulus, we are on the verge of collapse. I mean, there's no other way to look at it. You see a stock market and you look at the overinflated numbers coming out of the Fed on the stock market right now, where there's like a 70% increase in the valuations of these stocks that really shouldn't be, because companies are just flooded with cash on Wall Street. They have the money. You don't, but they do. And they're able to just swoop in and keep buying all these, keep investing, artificially driving up the prices. Because they have so much money, where do they put it? Well, if you're, like Tony High, who ran Zappos, you're building like 40, 50 homes right now in Park City, Utah, putting your money into real estate if you're smart, or precious metals, not the stock market. What's he doing? He's building all these single family homes because we have a housing crisis in this country. So talks continue. I wish I had more news. Both sides, though, say they have been pushing to reach an aid agreement and distribute more stimulus before the election. They want this done before the election. And President Trump was tweeting from his hospital bed, good for him, saying, get this done. We want a stimulus plan. Get it done. Pass this. Many of these lifelines that have been set up by Washington expired a few weeks ago. So we will hear from Fed Chief Jerome Powell, and we'll be watching what he has to say this week. Does he demand Congress do anything? I mean, he's already done this many, many times. I don't know how many more times he has to say it till he's blue in the face. Pass stimulus. State and local governments are bleeding right now. But even if Pelosi and Mnuchin actually reach an agreement, they would still have to then craft a proposal and then get it through a Republican-held Senate. Ted Cruz. Rand Paul. These guys don't want to spend a dime unless it benefits them personally, unless it benefits their corporate lobby interests, their corporate donors. They were fine to pass the CARES Act, lined all of these big companies' pockets. But now when it's up to the American people and taking care of them, what do they care? So that's the very latest on the stimulus. Talks continue. I'm not going to belabor it. If we have any news out of the talks this afternoon, if Nancy Pelosi comes out to the podium later this afternoon and says, we did it, we have an agreement, now we're going to put pen to paper and draft the bill, get it through committee, get it to the floor, I will report that. But right now, the talks continue on the stimulus. Let me know your thoughts in the chat below. How many of you have relied on one of these lifeline services? Unemployment benefits, paycheck protection program, stimulus bill, stimulus check, $1,200 stimulus check, all of these things. Let me know if you've relied on those, how much you need them right now. Please let me know in the comments below your thoughts on that. Thank you so much for subscribing to the channel, by the way. You got to check out our newsletter when you get a chance. Just go to morninginvest.com. How many of you sign up for our newsletter? It's totally free. We deliver it to your inbox first thing in the morning.